Right, that's Buddy Merrill, who was one of the musicians in Lawrence Welk's classic band. All those good-looking, smiling Midwestern people. Although I don't remember anybody that even looked like they had a tan in that band, ever, if you get my drift. I want to make a video here. It's going to take me a while to make it, and I'm sure I'm going to get killed with copyright land-ons. But what I want to do is, I want to try to gather up a photograph of the artist, of the sweet spot in guitar solos that these various individuals have taken in songs that just were terrifically inspiring to me. You know, there's a lot of videos out there where people are like, so-and-so, here are the 10 greatest underrated guitarists ever. Here are the 10 least appreciated amazing guitarists ever. Here are the 10 trippiest or most bizarre electric guitarists ever and stuff. And they always read to me like paraphrasings from classic music journalism, right? I subscribed to Rolling Stone for a lot of years and wrote for other magazines back in the 90s and 80s. And, you know, I was swapping tapes with Byron Coley, right? When he first moved over to Spin magazine. I think he started off on Forced Exposure. That's where I got a lot of my super rare Beefheart, you know, rehearsal tapes and stuff like that, outtakes. The original Bat Chain Puller recordings, as well as a bunch of video. Thank you, Byron. That was a really long time ago, wasn't it? But somebody like Byron Coley, or perhaps, I'm sure they're friends, Thurston Moore, or perhaps, you know, Fred Frith, or Brad Paisley, or Albert Lee, to get a perspective of, you know, UK talent, would be the guys that I'd want to go to and say, who are the most compelling and singular guitarists? Look at that, a butterfly, black and orange, just landed on me. Hi. Somebody's got tree work going on about 2 streets over. That's what you're hearing in the background. But I'd like to ask those guys, right? If you could pick 5 guitar solos that you don't think a lot of people have ever heard yet, in songs that are really seminal for you as a guitar artist, right? As a painterly guitarist. David Torn, I'd love to talk to him. I'd love to talk to Terry Riptle, right? And I'd like to talk to Rene Lucier. And I'd like to talk to any of the living guitarists that played with Don Van Vliet back in the Magic Band through his entire canon. Morris Tepper would be an interesting guy to talk to. I remember one time Morris tried to get me to set up a website for him for free. I've never really stepped into that kind of service comfortably in the past, where somebody I don't know suddenly has a big ask. But I really like Morris's playing, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Solo work too. But that should give you kind of a clue as to where this study is going to go. And it's possible that some of the things that I put in there will be things that a fair number of people have encountered. If you're someone that's a jazz, prog, or for that matter, rockabilly fan, some stuff might show up and you'll go, oh yeah, I heard that, and I liked it. But I'm going to try to really do a deep dive. Not to purposefully omit anyone that really belongs in here, but rather to be a lot less redundant, and also to not just talk about what they played, but try to give you a little taste of it. And I'm not sure, to be honest, I'm talking to the algorithm now, how it is that you determine that doing this is a bad thing and that a video needs to be blocked. It seems to me this is only mammon thinking, right? And in the short term too, like, give me that nickel right this minute. I'd like to think that any of us, and this is a lot of people who are content creators, any of us that are bringing attention to recorded music that most people have never heard of, should never get clobbered for assisting that rare thing. There may be boxes of albums and CDs sitting somewhere that haven't sold for years, and those people would like to sell them. And I would like to help them sell them. I'd like to see more guitar players that don't sound like cover bands. I mean it. One-person cover bands whipping out all the riffs that they've learned off of hit songs. I could give a damn about that kind of familiarity and the mastery of something that somebody else thought up. It's never been my style. Okay, life has way too much velocity and urgencies in it to waste time trying to sound like somebody else. I mean, even before I was, rather militantly opposed to idolatry, I sure knew what it felt like to do it, because I went through many seasons of just really adoring the creativity of various individuals and diving in there and listening to that stuff. And I was the kind of young man that was a completist. If I liked a certain comic book, I tried to get as many issues of it as I could. If I liked a certain musician or band, I wanted all of their work. I'd stop buying their work when their work began to suck, right? That's how come I stopped listening to King Crimson a long time ago. I just haven't heard anything that I like for a really long time. They got too large. They got too large. And King Crimson, for me, has always been a musical communal concept that works best when pared down. I can't say that I like a single King Crimson record that has more than 5 people playing. As much as I do things like Red and Discipline and Lark's Tongues and Starless, man, I'm telling you, that's like where you make the perfect the perfect little breakfast for yourself that only has 4 or 5 ingredients in it, and none of them are a spice. It's just the real deal. So, that intro music was Buddy Merrill. And you could hear that he was deriving a lot of what he was doing in there from people like Merrill Travis and a lot of the early lead players that played with people like, Elvis Presley, and there was a fair amount of Chuck Berry in what he was doing. I think he probably learned it through probably learning Bill Haley riffs, but that stuff leans heavily on Chuck Berry for sure, and also Ike Turner. So yeah, Buddy Merrill is a good example of someone that's heard a lot, practiced a lot, but really, and I love his playing. It's great. It's clean. I generally am not much of a Stratocaster fan, but he plays it really well. He has a nice tone. It's very clear. Kind of almost seems like an electric piano. You'll notice that he's not much of a bender. He doesn't do too much with bending strings. He's more pianistic about it, and I hear a lot of echoes of many hit early rock and roll tunes and blues influenced tunes, jump blues, in what he's doing. So Buddy Merrill, interesting player. Okay, I'm gonna pause and continue forward here, grabbing up a few video and audio clips, and welcome to this study. So this is Joe Maphis, and Joe Maphis feels to me like someone who in many respects is quite similar to a lot of other white guys that were playing electric guitars back then. He's playing a double neck, which I think is very cool, right? A lot of people never really saw a double neck until Jimmy Page came along and whipped one out. And then they kind of got popular. But yeah, Joe Maphis, he's fantastic. He plays really, really accurately. It's a real staccato kind of playing, similar to the previous player. And but you can see that at the beginning of that solo, he is adding something new here. Okay, it's a new thing, and this is going to kind of lead me over to Gatton and Buchanan. All right, this guy is muting with his palm. Did you hear that? Where he's those notes become gut string like. If he was a little more treble, or had a little more treble on his guitar, it would sound a little bit like a banjo. I like that. Okay, this is pre-pedal effects, and people are thinking about their tone, and you could call this guy a bit of a shredder because he's really zipping right along there, okay? And in a lot of ways, these two men here, if you take them and you combine some of the amazing stuff that was happening in country music, I think I'm going to have to, before I get to Gatton and Buchanan, I just thought of who I'm going to have to go to next. But at any rate, when the African American element enters into electric guitar played by white people, cultural appropriation is exactly what it is, okay? But anybody that's playing in a cover band is all about appropriation, okay? Their greatness is based on somebody else's song, okay? I love watching those legal videos that talk about settlements that had to be laid out or not because somebody copped a tune from someone else and, put a little lipstick on it and called it their own. right? But when country music, which was a type of fusion, okay, it took this raw work and Delta blues music that enslaved people, people that had a lot to write songs about and to play music about in their heart. When the cries of oppression met ragtime and Tin Pan Alley music, okay, vaudeville music, that was an American kind of fusion, as jazz was, okay? But jazz got incorporated. Everything got incorporated into rock and roll, okay? Rock and roll is like stone soup, okay? You start with something really earthy and common, like water and a rock. And as these various ingredients find their way into this soup, and a lot of them, as you may remember from that story, the stuff that people were putting in the soup, in some instances, was, almost leftovers and stuff to get rid of in the eyes of some. The contributor thought it was good enough as is. And there you are, you got yourself some rock and roll. Okay, I'm going to go hunt up Jimmy Bryant real quick. Just a second. Pause.
Speedy West and Flying High.
All right. Speedy West and Jimmy Bryant. Okay? We've got an electric guitar, we've got a pedal steel guitar. And here is where all of a sudden this is where we get to see the guitar back and forth. Okay? Early on, the guitar back and forth, the solo swap. Okay? People love this. People love this stuff. Okay? You've got, Albert Lee, Vince Gill, Brent Mason, and Danny Gatton all on the same stage swapping guitar solos. Oh my goodness, everybody loves this stuff. Players love it like crazy, okay? And these two guys, I think, if there were a way to talk to them, and documentaries are good, but I wish I could just talk to the person. They wanted people to be able to dance, okay? They realized that the best way to get a gig was to get connected with people that like to dance and give them something they can dance to. Okay? And these guys were fabulous. They made instrumentals cool right there in the midst of rock and roll and country music. And you could hear that there was blues stuff in there. Okay? I mean, once the lap steel and slide players looked over there at the guys that play with their fingers and realized, wait a minute, we're playing the same instrument, and aren't there a bunch of black dudes that like play with bottles and knives and pieces of pipe and stuff like that to do what the pedal steel guitar is doing? Wait a minute now. Once again, this is this fusion evolving. Right? I mean, for heaven's sakes, I know so many people that are fond of progressive rock, okay? And it's somewhat uniformly agreed upon that Soft Machine, this British band, Hugh Hopper, Mike Ratledge, Robert Wyatt, and I believe David Allen was their first guitarist and singer in the group. And there were a lot of changes, but there was sort of a core group of these three guys for a while, a rhythm section essentially, with an organ. People say that was the first prog rock. And guess what? They made people dance. A rave, people dance. Okay? People like to move. People like to move together. When people are moving together and they're not afraid, it's a wonderful feeling. Okay? And how many musicians have figured this out? Some figure it out and they say, I'm going to make a lot of money. Some people figure it out and say, wow, look at all these happy people. This is great. I like doing things that make people happy. There's lots of reasons to do music. Speedy West and Jimmy Bryant, look at how much fun they were having together. Really, you know? And it just pours off of them in the same way that bands Smiling, the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, were like a dentist commercial, okay? These guys realized that once people are dancing, you are free to horse around and have fun and take risks. Right? They're not going to hear that clam you played and think about it. They're dancing, for heaven's sakes. Okay? And the next couple of guys that I'm going to go into, I'll talk about both of them here. And I'll talk about both of them because they both were from the same part of the United States. Okay? They were all within, both these guys were in what you might call the Metro D.C. area. Okay? And Roy Buchanan and Danny Gatton are two of my favorite guitarists. I never tire of their music. None of it. And that's a high bar, considering what I said about Crimson earlier. Okay? And they knew how to work familiarity and enjoying playing the instrument into something that was very compelling to watch and listen to, too, okay, in person. I mean, we're watching this stuff on screens, but to have been in the room. And I could have been in the room to see Danny Gatton. I could have been in the room to see Roy Buchanan play when I was stationed in the Navy. Back in the mid-'80s. They were both still alive, performing, and I was living in Laurel, Maryland, right between Baltimore and D.C., and it would have been a piece of cake to go over the course of about 2 years to skip it off to either one of those urban centers if these guys were playing there, and I'm sure both of them played during that stretch in the mid-'80s there, and I missed it. Missed opportunities. Never saw Chicago live. Never saw Zeppelin live. Never saw the Stones live, for crying out loud. They're still playing. And both Buchanan and Gatton, unashamedly, and both of them would talk about their influences. Both of these guys had done a whole lot of time in front of real people. Okay? These weren't pandemic jammers getting good because there's nothing else to do. Okay? Gatton eventually pulled together this group called Redneck Jazz that is absolutely amazing. And he's the more jazzy of the two. And Roy Buchanan, who developed his chops, well, he taught Robbie Robertson how to play guitar and be cool way back in when he was in the Hawks before the band even formed. Okay, Buchanan went on to play with Merrill Haggard and other people. Okay, he was there before Red Volker or Johnny Hilland. Okay, he did the Merle Haggard road tour stuff for a while, and let me tell you something. When you watch Roy Buchanan play, he's looking at you. And if a bent and held note could speak a year of anguish, Buchanan would know which note that was and who to play it at. And Buchanan and Gatton, I will say this about both of them, in terms of being unique, unparalleled, painterly guitarists. They're way up there in the high bar zone for me as far as the American players go. And so, anyways, I'm gonna stop yapping because, as usual, my videos run too long. I might have to bust this into pieces. Who knows? But here we'll listen to a little bit of Roy first. Okay. Age Before Beauty, and then we'll follow up with some Gatton. And I think you're probably going to enjoy this if you're not familiar with these two people.